Meta, otherwise known as Facebook, just came out with a big mea culpa. So they sent this big letter out. They sent it to Jim Jordan. And they explained what really went down during 2020 and how they were pressured by the Biden-Harris administration to shut down any quote-unquote misinformation, some of which turned out to be true, about what was going on vis-a-vis COVID-19. They also were told by the FBI that they had to suppress any quote misinformation about that laptop that was allegedly nothing but a bunch of, Russian spoon-fed, courtesy of Giuliani, misinformation. So Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, just came out with this letter, and this is really astounding, guys. It's concerning because I know many people, myself included, actually, that were affected by this, especially when it came to the Hunter Biden laptop. I mean, that was a really, really, really big deal. But here you go. I underlined part of it. In 2020, senior officials from the Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire. My friends over at Badly on B, they went through this, guys, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. Ultimately, it was our decision whether or not to take content down. And we own our decisions, including COVID-19 related changes we made to our enforcement in the wake of this pressure. I believe the government pressure was wrong. And I regret that we were not more outspoken about it. I also think we made some choices that, with the benefit of hindsight and new information, we wouldn't make today. Like I said to our teams at the time, I feel strongly that we should not compromise our content standards due to pressure from any administration in either direction. And we're ready to push back if something like this happens again. I hope you are. I hope you are, Mark. He goes on to say, you remember that Hunter Biden laptop? Well, the FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation op about the Biden family and Burisma in the lead up to the 2020 elections that fall, when we saw a New York Post story reporting on corruption allegations involving then Democrat presidential nominee Joe Biden's family. We sent that story to fact checkers for review and temporarily demoted it while waiting for a reply. It's since been made clear that the reporting was not Russian disinformation. And in retrospect, we shouldn't have demoted the story. We changed our policies and processes to make sure this doesn't happen again. For instance, we no longer temporarily demote things in the U.S. while waiting for fact checkers. He goes on to say, in terms of those donations he made, he wants you to know that it was done with the best of intention. They were designed to be not partisan. They were nonpartisan, and they were supposed to be spread over urban, rural, and suburban communities, etc. But there is one big old mea culpa going on. I don't know how else you would describe that letter, but he seems to be having one of those come to Jesus moments. Just exactly why, I'm not entirely sure. And we can speculate on that. But first, I want you to hear Andrew McCarthy. He's a noted legal scholar, and he was just speaking on Fox about this very issue. I want you to hear his take.
I want to talk about another topic, this mea culpa from Mark Zuckerberg at Meta, and this letter to the Judiciary Committee. In 2021, he writes, senior officials from the Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. I believe the government pressure was wrong, and I regret we were not more outspoken about it. I also think we made some choices that, with the benefit of hindsight and new information, we wouldn't make today. He goes on, obviously, to talk also about the Hunter Biden case and the disinformation and the squelching, if you will, of those stories on his platform. What do you make of that in the big picture?
Well, I think two things, Brett. First, it would have been nice to have Zuckerberg's testimony in connection with the case that the Supreme Court considered at the end of the term, where they basically found that the people who brought the case against the government officials who induced the tech companies to suppress the information, they said they didn't have standing to sue them. This might have been something that might have helped that. But I think the most important part of this is just to put it in context. Let's remember, the the suppression of those stories was in the run-up to the election, October into November of 2020. The FBI got Hunter Biden's laptop in December of 2019. They knew for almost a year at the time that they put the pressure on these tech companies to suppress the story that the laptop was authentic. So to me, I think the big story is not just the fact that you have government putting its thumb on the scale and intimidating tech companies into taking actions that government couldn't itself do directly, but the deceit here under circumstances where they knew the true facts a year before they put this pressure on the tech companies is astonishing.
It is astonishing. I mean, that is, to me, that's the whole essence of this story. We have a First Amendment. The government should not be pressuring these companies, private companies, to do this, that, and the other. Now, granted, I guess you could say, let's have some room around the margins. Maybe, government can make its position. But what about the threat? Like, why did Meta feel so strongly that it had to take these things down? And why is he now saying, gee, we regret this now? I'll tell you, it's very interesting to see this evolution in Mark Zuckerberg. I don't know if Elon is talking to him on the side or some of his other buddies, Peter Thiel, other people within the tech community that are quite concerned about the direction Kamala Harris would take us in. But here's Mark Zuckerberg talking with Bloomberg anchor Emily Chan just shortly after the whole ordeal in Butler County, Pennsylvania happened.
I've done some stuff personally in the past. I'm not planning on doing that this time. And that includes, not endorsing either of the candidates. Now, look, there's obviously a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. The historic events over the last, over the weekend. And, on a personal note, it's, seeing Donald Trump get up after getting shot in the face and pump his fist in the air with the American flag is one of the most badass things I've ever seen in my life. But look, it's, and I think, look, it's, at some level as an American, it's hard to not get kind of emotional about that spirit and that fight. And I think that's why a lot of people like the guy.
Yeah. So very different kind of tone that we're seeing out of Meta right now. It could be that they see the handwriting on the wall, right? And they see the same kind of polls that I'm looking at, that, they're not drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak. Going back to some of those, for example, Polymarket showing us, hey, this thing is neck and neck, right? There's one side that very well could win it. Or, you look at Rasmussen, you look at Fox. He's ahead in some of these. So you can sit there and pretend that he doesn't have a shot in HELL, and you can try and sort of, I guess, demotivate the other side. But I think Mark Zuckerberg knows that there's a real shot Donald Trump might be back in the White House. So you don't necessarily want to be on the wrong end of that trade, so to speak, nor would investors want him to be, by the way, on the wrong end of that trade. There's a lot of good things that could happen for that company, provided it's given the room and the opportunity to do so. But you got to shore this thing up, buddy boy, right? You got to fix this, because we do have this little thing called the First Amendment, and you can't just willy-nilly go around and say, well, we don't think you're funny, Babylon B, so we're going to take you down, and we're going to take you down pretty hard and pretty fast. And that's exactly what had transpired.